Today's Bad Fact with Pat is a special themed edition. We're going to talk about the pagan origins of Valentine's Day and why it ended in the 5th century. Hint, probably had to do with some meddling Christians who didn't like it very much. Now, the pre-Christian origins of Valentine's Day are just fascinating. It actually takes us back into ancient mythology of even Rome itself, prior to the real founding, back to the mythical founding of the city of Rome, having to do with the legendary characters Romulus and Remus. You know, those guys. Suckled on a she-wolf, divine beings. We'll get to that in just a second. Now, this is where the festival takes a turn. Again, the festival of Romulus and Remus, suckled by a she-wolf, was known as the Lupercalia. It actually symbolized the annual renewal. It was a fertility ritual in many ways. Renewal of the city of Rome itself by giving honor to these two mythical progenitors, Romulus and Remus. Rome's actually named after Romulus. Remus dies, his story's over. The important thing to remember here is that the word lupus comes from wolf, tied back to the she-wolf, and the priests that were participating in this ritual were known as the Luperci. Now, what would these priests do? Well, they'd go to a cave in one of the hills in Rome, sacred site, and undergo a very ritualized form of sacrifice. They'd sacrifice a goat, sometimes more than one, and a dog, again, sometimes more than one. They would then skin these animals and then take their pelts and skin them into long strips. Having collected the blood during this ritual sacrifice, they would then dip the skin, which is covered in hair, into the blood. And the priest would then head out, themselves having been covered in blood through this ritual process, and they would swing this bloody mass of skin at people. And people would actually seek this out. It was a form of ritual purification through this flagellation. If you were a woman, it was all the rage. You had to go get hit by one of these priests because it increased, or it was believed to increase, your chances of fertility through ritual purification with the use of blood. Ever heard about that before? Being purified by the blood? Never mind. And so women would actually seek them out. And it was very popular to follow them along and to be struck and have all these bloody slash marks that would look like, but it was just from the strips of cloth being beaten onto you, around you. And you'd walk around to let people know you had participated in the Lupercalia for that day. Now, after being inside the town, these priests would also go to the adjacent farms and such around the city of Rome and would perform similar rituals and engage with the fields and the crops and all that in order to produce fertility in that region. But the festival could go from being somewhat serious to being quite overblown in a party. Cicero actually famously complained that the Lupercalia had turned into, during his time, a drunk festival where women were wanting to get pregnant and did more than just get hit by the priests with these bloody instruments. The priests may have helped them get pregnant, was his accusation, and that it had turned into a actual festival of debauchery. Now, whether or not that's an accurate reflection, we do know that at different times, different historical people, historians, reflected on Lupercalia from tones ranging from very, very sincere and sacred to extremely lighthearted, and all the way to having quite a bit of disdain for the practice. Needless to say that the festival was very popular to the Romans because it was uniquely Roman in its origin, and many, many, many Romans looked forward to the festival of Lupercalia annually. And at that time, the empire was heading to a majority Christian population, and so the practice effectively ended. Now, how do we get from Valentine's Day today back to Valentine's Day and the Lupercalia? We really don't. This is the issue. Now, this connection to Lupercalia is somewhat tenuous because we don't actually see celebration of Saint Valentine's as a saint recognized within the church until the 14th century. Some people assert it may have happened as early as the 12th, but again, it's several centuries later. But there is this allusion back to an earlier time period. Now, the practice itself, the fact that Valentine's Day is associated with lovers and fertility, and some of the symbols, i.e., This guy, that's right, Cupid. Now, who was he? Cupid is a deity actually associated with the goddess Venus, kind of like a lesser deity that himself is a helper to a greater deity. Now, Venus is Greek Aphrodite and goddess of love. But how, Pat, do we get from the Lupercalia to Valentine's Day in the 12th or 14th century? Now, can anyone definitively say that the Lupercalia is the ancient pagan origin of St. Valentine's Day? No, but a lot of the symbols and imagery make you wonder. And that's been another Mad Fact with Pat.